Hello everybody! Welcome back! It's been a very long time since I did an episode of Littleland, and for that I'm really sorry, guys. I've just not been well lately. So I've been kind of hibernating and trying to get myself back into tip-top shape so I can make videos for you. And for the longest time, I just wasn't feeling very creative. And I got stuck in a little spot, and I found it really hard to write myself out of that little spot. But over the last couple of days, I've just had a huge burst of creativity, and I managed to write a few more chapters of Littleland. So here we go. Today you're going to get a treat, because I made you wait for so very, very long. So this will be a couple of chapters for you, as a treat. Just for you guys, the very best fans in the entire world. Okay, I'm pretty sure that you guys are smart cookies and you're pretty switched on and you know the drill by now. But just in case you're not, I'd like you to go get a blanket. I'd like you to get a storytime companion. That can be a stuffed animal or a people or a pet if you like. And settle down and let's have a story. Okay? Okay. So, oh my gosh, yet again. One day I'll have my stuff together. One day. This is Littleland, Part 2, Chapter 15. Outdoors, whilst awaiting the return of their peer, the little ones explored the front yard. Frank crouched near the path, observing a line of ants that wove through the cobblestones and down away from the snow into their nest. Even the ants, so tiny in ordinary life, seemed oversized. This fascinated Frank, and he watched them keenly. Nearby, Piper made an attempt to begin a snowball fight. Vanessa gave a squeak of surprise when the first pitch hit her neck and sent icy slivers down the back of her snowsuit. Just as Vanessa leant down to gather a snowball of her own, Ethan tightened the reins. The little girl let her palmful of snow fall to the ground, feeling it unfair to launch an assault on a captive target. The attention of Aiden James Phillips was drawn in a different direction, out towards the woods. He'd seen a flutter of something amidst the trees. Aiden waddled to the perimeter of the yard and looked out through the fence palings. Upon closer inspection, the trees were still. Aiden squinted with suspicion. He was positive he'd seen something. "Aiden! Lad, what are you looking at?" came Ethan's voice from over his shoulder, and he jumped slightly, startled. "Just looking at the trees," Aiden called. "Well, we're going out there in just a minute, little man. Come back over here where I can see you, please." At last, the doctor emerged from the cabin with Danny, who was red-faced but composed. "He's back! We can go!" cried Aiden, rushing towards the gate. "Hold your horses, lads. Stay with the group," said Ethan, chuckling as he strode in the same direction. "What are you so excited about?" asked Piper, toddling beside Ethan. "I don't know. I thought I saw something out there," said Aiden, gesturing towards the trees, his brows once again knitted with suspicion. "What do you think you saw?" "I don't know, but I know I saw something." As Ethan unlatched the gate, Aiden looked out at the woods with determination. "Whatever you saw," began Ethan, pausing briefly to survey Aiden as he passed through the gate, "you're not to run off chasing it." "Yeah, you don't want to end up like me," said Piper, ominously, giving a demonstrative tug on her reins. The thick fabric had no give, and Piper remained rooted to the spot. Aiden gave a shudder. "Miss Emily," he looked up toward his caregiver, who had fallen into step behind him and taken his hand. "Yes, sweet pea," she responded. "You wouldn't do that to me, would you?" "As long as you stay with the group, of course I wouldn't." Whatever Aiden had seen, his attention was soon diverted to more pressing matters, that being the allure of a meadow, freshly blanketed in soft white snow. Unbeknownst to the little ones, Mickey, who had remained at the back of the group, carried with him a surprise. He entered the clearing, dragging this surprise behind him, leaving a wide, flat trail in his wake. "Toboggan," whispered Aiden in excitement, pulling Miss Emily toward the sled. They spent the morning in the snow. Aiden and Danny were first to reach the sled. Piper and Ethan arrived shortly after, and all four climbed aboard. Vanessa and Frank, under the careful eye of the doctor and Miss Mia, began construction of a snow fort. Soon, Danny, tired of cruising down the gentle slopes on the toboggan, wandered over to where Vanessa and Frank knelt in the snow. They had completed one wall that stood as tall as they did, and their faces glowed with pride, excitement, and the freezing air. Piper, also glowing with the cold and enthusiasm, gave a call of joy from aboard the sled as it dipped down a hill. In fact, so great was the excitement in the meadow that morning that nobody noticed Aiden wander toward the trees and slip between them, out of sight. Soon, even Piper grew weary, and Ethan carried her over to the beginnings of what looked like a magnificent snow fort. 3 walls were now completed, and the trio had begun work on a 4th. "Wait," thought Piper. "Where's Aiden?" She spoke aloud, looking alarmedly around the group. "He's not on the sled still?" asked Danny, not looking up from the doorway he was shaping. "No, he's not," confirmed Ethan, and Danny's eyes widened, his arms falling to his sides. "He said he was coming over here," said Miss Emily, her voice betraying the rising degree of her concern. "We haven't seen him," said Miss Mia, closing her paper back and standing up with haste. "Gilbert, did you notice anything?" The doctor shook his head, gravely. "I think I know where he went," said Ethan, tiredly, rubbing his forehead with an open palm. "In there." The group looked to where Ethan pointed. To Vanessa, the trees looked more foreboding than they had a moment ago. They appeared to loom down upon the little ones, the branches threatening to swallow their friend and never give him back. She shuddered and fought the tight feeling in the back of her throat that begged her to cry. "In that case," the doctor began, addressing Ethan and Emily, who listened intently, "we will go and fetch him. Michael, you will help Miss Mia with the little ones, please." "Yes, sir," said Mickey, offering hands to help Danny and Frank up from where they knelt. Ethan passed Piper's lead to Mia, who looped it securely around her wrist. "Be good now," he said, leaning down to kiss the top of Piper's auburn head. Vanessa sniffled as she rose from her seat and reached upward for her caregiver, who leant down and gathered her up. "Oh, sweetheart," said Miss Mia, feeling Vanessa's shuddery breathing. "It's gonna be okay." There it was again. A flash of brown, white, and orange from behind the trees. Aiden all but leapt off the sled as it came to a stop. "Aiden, lad, where you going?" called Ethan, and Aiden indicated the gang of builders in the corner of the meadow. Ethan nodded and returned his attention to the sled he was currently piloting. Unnoticed, Aiden slipped between the trees. At last he would solve the mystery that had plagued him all morning. What had he seen? The pine trees swayed gently in the breeze, showering Aiden with tiny slivers of ice as he continued through the woods. He hoped he was going in the right direction. He hoped he'd learn the secret, and he hoped he'd learn it soon. His diaper had grown heavy, and it chafed him painfully with each step that led him deeper into the forest. He thought better of his impulse to remove it. Aiden couldn't begin to imagine the trouble he'd be in if he took his diaper off and left it in the woods. It was then that it occurred to Aiden that right at this moment, he was already in unimaginable trouble. He had intended to discover the source of the color flash and immediately return to the clearing before anyone had noticed his departure. Instead, he'd gotten lost. Trees stretched out in all directions, visibility low from the soft mist that floated groundward from the tree branches. His stomach rumbled angrily. By his estimation, it was near noon. That meant he'd been slogging through the trees for upwards of an hour, and still he hadn't been found. What if they never found him? He wondered. Or worse, what was apt to happen when they did? Aiden tried his best to eschew those thoughts from his head. He had more pressing things to worry about. His chapped thighs gave a timely sting. Aiden sighed and stopped in his tracks. He unzipped the snowsuit, just long enough to free himself of the dreadful sodden mess that clung to his behind, and unfortunately to let in a blast of frigid air. Aiden hastily restored the zip to its proper upright position and balled up the spent diaper. Thinking quickly, he removed his hat from his head and repurposed it into a diaper containment system. Aiden James Phillips would do a lot of things. He would wander off from the group despite being clearly told not to. He would remove his diaper when he knew it was forbidden. But he wouldn't. He couldn't litter. Aiden pressed on, now free of chafe. His ears grew cold, and as he lifted his mittens to warm them, he heard a rustle in the bushes directly to the right of him. This time, Aiden turned his head just as the creature who'd made the noise darted from its current bush and into the undergrowth, and he was able to note two things. The first was that the flash of colour appeared to have long fur in a mix of rust, light brown, and a white so pure it was lost against the snow. The second, more alarmingly than the first, was that the creature was not small. Aiden had a fondness for animals, but even this didn't calm his hammering heart. He was in the biggest trouble he'd ever found himself in, hopelessly lost in a forest, carrying a diaper and a beanie, and in close proximity to a large wild animal of unknown species. The world felt all at once as if it were both dizzyingly large and nauseatingly small. Every rustle accelerated his heart rate. The sound of the wind through the trees was deafening. Aiden pressed his mittens against his ears in earnest. He sank down to rest in the snow, his back against a tree. He closed his eyes and focused on his breathing, as Dr. Nora had taught him. Why had he run off? Solving the mystery had not been worth it, Aiden decided. He welcomed whatever discipline was set to befall him when they found him. If they found him. Once Aiden's heartbeat returned to its usual rate, he swallowed hard and opened his eyes. And to his surprise, he wasn't alone. The creature sat just across from him, preening its dense calico coat with a single delicate paw. It seemed to register Aiden's gaze, and it let out a sound of curiosity. "Kitty," said Aiden, dazedly, and he gave a sniffle. The cat sprang to its feet and crossed the short gap with quick, deft trots. It walked alongside Aiden, tilting its head sideways as it went to rub against the little boy's shoulder. As it did, Aiden felt a deep, calming purr radiating to his chest. The cat turned and repeated the move, looking back at the boy as it passed, then forward to the trees. Did it want him to follow? The cat turned once more and sat in front of Aiden. "What do you want, kitty?" he whispered. The cat gave a slow, sleepy blink of its large yellow eyes. It pivoted once more and proceeded deeper into the woods, stopping after 5 or so paces. The cat let out a soft meow, and Aiden rose to his feet. The cat made a happy little chirp and pressed on, Aiden following it cautiously. It didn't seem possible to be led through the forest by a monstrously large calico cat, and yet Aiden couldn't deny the reality of the situation. However absurd this course of action might seem, it felt preferable to either of the previous possible options, that being starvation or the imminent threat of a severe walloping. At least with this option, he got to meet a cat. Soon, Aiden noticed light beaming through the trees. "Is this what you wanted to show me, kitty?" The cat seemed to answer back with a meow that felt triumphant. The unlikely travelling companions came out of the trees and into a clearing that was bathed in sunlight. Aiden squinted, taking a moment to reorient himself in the light. He hadn't realised just how much shade the trees had provided. Aiden had assumed they'd been headed towards the cabin, but he'd been mistaken. The cabin at which they had just arrived was much smaller and had a bright red door. Smoke puffed from the chimney, and the glow of garden lanterns could be seen on the front lawn. The porch steps looked prohibitively tall, and Aiden felt a pang of anxiety. He didn't want to go in there. He wanted to go back. Consequences be darned. He missed Miss Emily. "Kitty, can we go home?" whispered Aiden. "Back to the big cabin, I mean?" The cat gave no answer. It merely slipped up the steps and in through a cat flap, leaving the little boy shivering in the yard. Aiden's lower lip began to tremble. Then there came a sound. A heavy, creaking sound. Aiden looked up towards the cabin and saw that the door was opening. His heart sped up immediately, and he took in a shaky breath. "All right, who have we got here?" came a voice, deep yet clear, as a large, stout man stepped into view. Aiden felt frozen to the spot, swallowing hard. The only movement he was able to make was to tuck his diaper-filled beanie behind his back. "Oh, it's a little one," said the man, hurrying down the porch steps, still fastening the buttons on his maroon winter coat. He was as tall as the caregivers, with round spectacles and a long white beard. "What are you doing out here, young man?" The man's voice was stern, with a hint of warm concern, and Aiden was calmed slightly. The man knelt down before Aiden and held out a hand. Aiden, feeling overwhelmed, grasped the man's hand and jerked downward in a firm handshake. I'm Aiden James Phillips." The man surveyed Aiden for a few moments, and then he began to chuckle. Aiden relaxed, and noted that the man's white mustache curled up at the ends when he smiled. "Well, that's a fine name to go along with a fine handshake, little one, but you didn't answer my other question. What are you doing out here?" He fixed the little boy with a stern expression, anticipating his answer. "I guess I wandered away," admitted Aiden in a small voice. I saw something in the woods, and I wanted to know what it was." "I see," said the man, straightening up and offering the boy a hand to do the same. "Well, my name is Tom. Most little ones call me Papa Tom. Would you like to come inside where it's warm while we let your big ones know where you've wandered off to?" Aiden was conscious of his chattering teeth and frozen ears. He nodded hard. "All right, in we go," said Papa Tom, leading down to collect Aiden from the ground. In surprise, Aiden's fingers uncurled and his beanie fell to the snow. Papa Tom stooped to retrieve it. "Wait, don't," said Aiden, reaching out ineffectually to grab the man's arm. "Leave only footprints," he said, giving Aiden a gentle tap on the nose. He retrieved the beanie from the forest floor and held it out of the boy's sight. "Now, I won't look inside this, but I will tell you that little boys who take their nappies off around here are asking for a smacked bottom," said Papa Tom, mildly, causing Aiden to blush a furious red that warmed every inch of his face, including his frozen ears. "I couldn't walk with it on," sniffled Aiden. "It was rubbing a hole in me." "Well, that's a different story, but I also don't have to tell you that it wouldn't be rubbing you if you hadn't run away, do I, little one?" "No, Papa Tom," said Aiden, dolefully. At this point, they'd reached the top of the porch stairs and stepped over the threshold into the warm cabin. The cat immediately materialized from the sitting room and began to weave in between the man's large feet. "I see you've met Mabel." "Mabel?" cried Aiden, gleefully. "That's the perfect name for you!" "She also goes by Mayflower or Miss Bell if you're feeling formally inclined." "I love her," said Aiden solemnly, watching Mabel blink her magnificent eyes. "She led me here. I think she knew I was lost." "Marvelous creatures, cats," said Papa Tom, heading down the hall. "Vera, honey, We have company.
Hooray! That was chapters 15 and 16 of Littleland Part 2. I hope you liked it, and I hope you liked the fact that we have new characters, and one of them's a great big kitty cat called Mabel. I'm not gonna lie to you, Mabel's my new favourite, and I love her. Maybe I'll write in a bit where one of the littles tries to pack her away in their bag to take her back, because we love Mabel. She's a good kitty. I hope you like these chapters of Littleland, and I hope you have a day that's one for the memory banks. I hope you write about it in your diary and you add lots of pretty stickers and draw a smiley face, because that's how good the day was. Bye, everybody.